All right, guys, let's get started. Okay. All right, so we're gonna start with the course. Today's the first day. Welcome to ITS 372, right? We're all in the correct room. You have to sign in. We have to do the course participation the first 2 or 3 weeks of the semester. So I have to report that. So make sure you always sign in. And there should be a sign-in sheet going around. Okay, so some of you I know already, and then some of you I don't, right? So this is usually how it works. So this is ITS 372. Today I will go over the syllabus, kind of give you an idea what the course is about, right? And this is a lecture lab class, right? So we're going to do, lab assignments on Thursdays usually and lecture on Tuesday, although I like to mix it up so Tuesdays are not too boring. I don't think this class is boring, right? So it should be a good class. Basically, if I had to uh, summarize it in one word, I would just say this course is about Linux, right? So if you've never taken Linux, that's fine. The whole point of this idea is for you to learn Linux, given that that's one of the tools that you'll be using a lot throughout your studies at the university, especially if you're like a cybersecurity student, Linux is essential. So we'll go over that. All right, so are there any questions before I begin? Everyone good? All right, so let's go ahead. So as you can see, I'm recording the sessions. I'm recording the session. I will usually do that. So I'll try to load the videos on YouTube and you can just follow along from there. You are required to come to class though, so I'll remind you. So this is just to help you out in everything that we do. All right, so this is the materials are on Brightspace. So there's usually two places where the materials will be. So they'll be on Brightspace or they will be on my GitHub. Right? So you can get them from there. And I'll show all of that today. So this is basically, I've already loaded the materials. We have the table of contents. So we see the admin module here. I'll go over the syllabus today and give you all that information. Then after that, you can see I have some resources, and then intro basically is your first module for the semester. We'll go over all of that. So these are the topics. They're all really Linux or Unix related topics. At the end of the semester, hopefully you will have a really good understanding of how Linux works, right? And you'll know basically how to do a lot of things. So there's a lot of things in this course. Now, I should say the course is actually not called Linux or Unix, right? So if you've noticed, the course is called System Administration. So there's that additional component of just being like a sysadmin. Right? So what is a sysadmin? Is somebody that works, provides IT support, right? But we're not going to cover Windows. So Windows is covered in other courses, right? So and the focus is entirely on Linux, basically, on Unix. Okay. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'll go over all of that today. So definitely, we are using Ubuntu basically for this. Okay. So, and I'll provide all that information on the virtual machine and everything that you have to do. Usually, for some reason, one of the hardest things I would say in this course is that the first week, because some of you don't really know how to use VirtualBox, and so you have issues setting up the VM. Okay. So I will try to cover that today, but just be prepared for that. This is an IT class, right? Your entire job will be solving computer problems, right? Securing a system. So it's always going to be challenging, right? So, but that's the fun of it, right? So that's what makes it interesting. So definitely that's the emphasis. And like I said, I'll cover this. But as I was saying, the other focus of the course is just system administration in general, right? So, we're going to talk about what that is, right? So, provide, IT support, but you might think that IT support is just, okay, my computer doesn't work, let's unplug it or something, but it's much more complex than that, right? So there's going to be networking issues, there's going to be service issues. We're going to learn about all the different services that are available. Okay. Now, another component that's really important in this class is automation, right? So the example that I'll give you is, for instance, let's say that you have to create 100 accounts, right? You have 100 new employees that are coming in. Do you really want to create these 100 accounts manually? Do you know what I mean? So do you go in and create the first one, then the second, then the third one, then the fourth one? You're going to spend your whole morning, your whole day doing it, right? So is it possible to automate, right? And so that takes us to the idea of scripting. Okay, so that's the other component in this course. Every week, we'll look at a topic, right, related to system administration that also ties into Linux or Unix, and that also has a scripting component. Okay, so if you don't like programming, this is not programming in that sense. This is, I call it, you call it scripting. You'll see that the scripts are pretty simple. They just use very basic programming tools that you should know, or approaches that you should already know about, right? And it'll basically just focuses on the library. So the two scripting languages that we will use are Python, which will be the main language that we will use. And then I will also cover Bash, because Bash is really important for Unix or Linux. Does that make sense? So that's in general the basic idea of the course. Okay. All right. So, and then there's a lot of topics that we will cover. Automation is interesting because, as you guys know, with artificial intelligence and everything, all of this is going to become even more automated. So in the future, you will be competing against, AI frameworks, right? In this, so you have to really understand how this works. It's funny though, because from what I've been hearing, all this automation that's going to happen in a company with regards to AI, it's really going to fall to the IT department to implement and manage. So it's actually like a new thing that is going to be dumped on you. All right, and this is really interesting, actually. So we'll look at that, a little bit of that. This is not a machine learning course, obviously, but I will, as part of that idea, I will kind of show you where this is going. All right. So anyway, let's get started. So I'm going to start with the syllabus here. So we're going to formally go over. All right. So you guys are seeing the syllabus here. So ITS 372, as I said, is called System Administration and Management. The management part does have some recommendations of how to be a good system administrator, right? So what are some of the things that you should do? How basically customer service, all that stuff, the help desk. So there will be some readings that I will provide that are a little bit less technical, right, and more managerial. And I'll just point that out. I'll say in a week, okay, make sure you read this. Now, one nice thing about it is that basically all that material is coming from this book, The Practice of System and Network Administration. But as you can see, I've marked it as not required. I've pretty much gone over that book and I summarized everything into slides. Okay, so you can, so I've already loaded the slides on Brightspace, and all you have to do is go through the slides and read it. And that's going to be the managerial component. Because there's so much material in this class, I won't really have time to cover that managerial part, but it's something that you can easily comprehend just by reading. And basically in the course, I just cover the technical aspects, okay? Make sense? All right. So I'm Professor Calix. My office is Anderson 238. The web page is going to be Brightspace. That's my email. Office hours will be, so I have a very strange schedule this week or this semester. So my office hours are going to be Mondays and Wednesdays. So just before this class at 11 or after the classes that I teach, which is going to be 4. Okay, so it's going to be Mondays and Wednesdays, 11 to 12 or 4 to 5. Does that make sense? Because I have a class now and I have another class after this one. All right, and then if you want to meet me at other times, you have to do that by appointment. So you have to just send me an email. And I'm usually in my office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Make sense? Right. All right. But like I said, I will be trying to provide all the videos, all the lectures and labs, so you guys can have that resource as well to help you out. All right. So the prereqs are supposed to be operating systems 135, which is more of your Windows more of your Windows class, Windows operating system. So you can think of that's how to manage Windows Server and all that stuff. So I'm sure you went over that class. Do you have a question?
I'm not on your roster yet. There's like account complications, but I'm like in this class.
Okay.
That's
Okay, just have a seat. Yeah, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, so 135 is your Windows Server class. So I'm sure you guys have taken that. ITS 140, which is the intro to programming with Python, or any other course that introduces a little bit of programming. As I said, since there's a scripting component all semester. The one thing about Python is very easy. I will do a very quick review, right? And then just ask me otherwise if you have any issues. So in Python, what are we going to do? We're going to learn, okay, a library called Scapy, for instance, is a networking library. So then we can create you guys know about ping, right? So you can ping one computer to another computer. So we're just going to learn how to do that with Python. So with a library, we can create a ping packet, and we use that for system administration. So that's the general idea. And then the other prereq is 270, I think, which is one of it. So you should have some knowledge of networking. And that's because we will cover, from the point of view of system administration, some protocols like, what is SNMP, right? SSH, things that connect from one computer to another, DNS, etc. when we look at some security aspects as well. All right. So anyway, the other two books that I used as reference when I prepared this course initially were Essential System Administration, Tools and Techniques for Linux and Unix. I really like this book. You don't have to get it, but it's like a Linux Bible. You know what I mean? Like one of those books that has everything about Linux. It's up to you if you want to get it just to read. It's massive, so obviously I can't really cover every topic in that book. But if you really like Linux, that's a good book to get. And then another book I have used is Python for Unix and Linux. So as the name implies, it's still about Unix and Linux, but basically through Python, right? So writing Python scripts, etc., to learn how to interact with the operating system. All right. And again, the reason why we do that is automation, right? So you don't want to remember, you don't want to spend the whole day creating accounts. You'll see with system administrators, they just have a whole bunch of scripts for running everything. These are going to be in Bash, Python, or whatever language they like. And in the future, probably AI agents and a whole bunch of different things, right? So even more automation can be expected. And I honestly think it's not like it's going to take your jobs, but it's if anything, it's going to make you more productive, right? So having really good knowledge of all that is really important. Right? All right, so the course description, we can go over that. So this course covers topics on computer system administration with a focus on Unix. Topics include system performance analysis, and that makes sense because a lot of your tasks sometimes, your goal is for the network to run properly, right? So the whole IT operation, in fact, to run properly. So being able to monitor the systems is really important, right? Performance metrics, etc. So that again is automation in a sense. There's protocols and networking, as I said, like SNMP, or there's various tools that you can use. So we will cover that basically. How do we automate monitoring basically? Benchmarking, monitoring services, testing, debugging. Obviously, configuration of Unix services is a lot of what we do. So setting up a service, right? So the classic example is a web server, right? So that's a web service. We want to set up email server, all kinds of things. Obviously, talking about computers and Unix, either desktops or servers, involves security. So we have to talk about security strategies. As I said, we'll talk extensively about access control, basically. Access control is the central thing, the central security mechanism in Unix, right? And I'm sure you've looked at it before, right? And so we'll cover that as well. File system analysis, automation and auditing, scripting, server roles, and special topics. Okay, so this is basically the course description. Here's a breakdown of the course objectives and topics. So you can see that. And I've kind of mapped this to where we'll find this information. So sometimes it's in the book, which basically means the slides, or it's going to be in the lab that we're going to cover. So these are the individual topics. All right. Here is the grading and assessment criteria. So this is probably very important. If you notice, labs and homework are going to be 50% of your grade. Don't miss homework assignments. That's the best recommendation I can give you. Okay, if you students that fail this course, it's because they just don't do their homework. All right. You're going to have a homework assignment every week for sure. Right. So there's a lot of labs, but they're very doable. Right. So just make sure take those. Term project, it's 10% of your grade. So usually when I teach 300 level classes, I don't like to make the projects be too expensive, cost too many points. And I actually break it down into A and B in the past. So that would be 5 points for A, 5 points for B. I don't know. That may change a little bit. So I may just do one project or two. So we'll see. But in general, it's going to be about 10% of your grade for the project. Quizzes, teamwork is 10, participation is 10% of your grade. So basically, if you attend class, don't miss quizzes, teamwork, just civility in the classroom, you have 10 free points. Okay. So just attend class basically. And then exams for 30% of your grade. There will be 3 exams, exam 1, exam 2, and the final exam. So exam 1 is on week 6. So this is week 1, right? So week 6 will be exam 1. Week 12 will be exam 2, and then the final exam during finals week. Exams are usually 10 problems, could be like explain, describe, list, write some code, a script. 5 to 10 questions. You have to attend class. They're like written exams. Yeah, and so that's the idea. They're closed notes. They're comprehensive. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. Yeah. So that's the syllabus. The one thing I will say about homework assignments is homework assignments need to be submitted on time and on Brightspace. Please don't email me homework assignments. I'm not gonna grade. Okay. That's I'm the nicest person, but I have this one rule. No homework assignments via email, okay? Because otherwise my inbox just gets too full and I can never find anything. So please do not submit homework assignments via email. So one hard rule. All right, so submit on time. That's usually the way that submissions work is basically on Thursday, I will assign the homework and you have a week to complete it. Okay, so you have 1 week to complete the assignment. But I usually have what I call a soft deadline and a hard deadline. So if a homework assignment is, you'll for instance, this week, you'll get an assignment this Thursday, and it's going to be due a week from Thursday, but that's the soft deadline. So that means it's going to stay open until Sunday, and Sunday is actually the hard deadline. So as long as you submit by Sunday, you're good. It's going to mark you as late, but that doesn't affect you and you don't lose any points. I just do it to kind of like pressure you to know, okay, I'm late. And so somehow psychologically, it makes you want to submit on time. Do you see what I'm saying? All right, but just try to, so you usually have until Sunday, okay? Yeah. Do you have a question? No. All right. Yeah, so that's the idea. Just pass that around. There's a few students. He just came in. Yeah, just pass that. Please. We had an exam. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Just no. So we just started with the syllabus. That's basically it. All right. Yeah, so read the syllabus, please. There's a few policies that you should, know about, things that I have to add to the syllabus. So read through that. There's this university policies and procedures, emergency procedures and guides. Make sure you read through that as well. That's just the university wants us to put that in there. So here's the topics. Usually this is going to be the schedule and the list of topics and how I'm going to cover them. I mean, it may be subject to change, things do change. So, but in general, it's going to be like this. So there's 16 modules basically for 16 weeks. So we'll cover intro to system administration, intro to Unix, right? So today, basically, I have to show you the virtual machine. I have to show you the Linux operating system that we will be using, and basically we start to learn a few Linux commands. Okay, so that's kind of the general idea. And that's basically going to be the whole week, right? Just learning about 20 Linux commands, and depending on whether you've used VirtualBox before, that's really your big challenge for this week, is making sure that you get your operating system up and running. Okay. And then next week we'll start, I'll give an intro to scripting for Linux and sysadmin. So that means Python. We're going to look at Python and basically the libraries that we can start using for sysadmin, how we can start collecting data about the operating system. So the basic idea with Python is going to be this interaction with the operating system, okay, with Unix. How do we interact with it and get information and also get it to do things, right? So that's the whole idea. Then we're going to look at task scheduling, cron, which is a facility of Unix. We're going to look at DNS, and you can see also the managerial aspects of the course are also included here, like customer care, help desks, and automated backup. So these are things that are in the slides, basically, for you to read. Week 6 is exam 1. Then we have things like namespaces, user account management, services, and such as SSH, HTTP, and so on. Okay, so that's basically the entire syllabus. Any questions? Good. All right, great. So we're done with that whole part of today. Okay, so let's go back to the table of contents. Okay, so we covered the syllabus. Now I need to cover a few other things like resources, etc., things that you can find things. All right, so this is going to be basically the project details. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we did. Oh, it didn't? It should be going around. There it is. Yeah, please sign in. I only do this for the first 3 or 4 weeks because we have to do this thing called class participation, which is required by the university. All right, so as I was saying, this is usually the project description. I don't know if I'll change the project this semester. In the past, I have done one project, which is to configure something really hard in Linux. Okay, so it's like a service, and it's just something that is not easy, because, if you think about it, what is system administration usually is like maintaining the operating system, but also people may ask you, hey, I want you to install this on Linux so that we can use it for the company. And it's not just going to be like installing Microsoft Word, right? It's going to be something really challenging. All right. And so that has been a project that I have given students in the past. There's a service called Hadoop. It's a complicated like clustering type of thing in Linux. So that has been the project in the past. And so that may be what that could be part of the project, or it could be an assignment this semester, right? So just to kind of test your skills in Linux by proving to yourself that you can configure something really difficult, right? So that may be what we do, or I may just change it. All right, go back to the table of contents. So I think the next module that I like to cover usually is the resources. So I should have that. Yeah, you can see that resources. So this is where you can find a lot of things that we will need for the class. So let's start here. So I do have a little website with like a calendar of topics and links, so you can look at that. This is the GitHub, so let's definitely look at that. So you guys probably know what GitHub is, I'm sure. You've heard about it, pretty important. It's really nice for loading code, right? So all the code usually that we'll cover in the course is here, all right? So don't forget that I've already posted all the scripts that I'm going to cover during the semester here. They're organized by different things sometimes. So for instance, I have bash scripts. So these are a lot of the bash scripts that we're going to go over, right? So I will, there's going to be a point in the semester where I will go over each of these, right? And then you can expect there's going to be a homework assignment with 3 to 5 problems that you have to solve. And basically what you have to do is write a bash script, for instance, to solve that problem. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, but anyway, I've already provided everything for you. So bash, Docker is, some containers, creating containers in Linux. So that's a topic that we'll cover later in the semester. This is related to file system. Geolocate is more like security. MapReduce is like parallel computing. UFW and SCAPI. So this is security again, networking and firewalls. Some basic things. So I'll probably start here and then SNMP, right? So these are some of the folders. And then I have a few additional scripts here that are really important that we'll cover. Anaconda is a service that we'll look at and some of the commands for that. Git, which is something related to committing code to GitHub, for instance, and so on. So there's various things, right? And so this is the resource. So again, for now, just know that this is available every week. You'll be using this. I think this week actually, or next week probably, I will come here and this will be our first set of scripts that we will cover from the GitHub. So it's just a quick intro to Python. How many of you have taken Python already? All right, so some of you have, and great, excellent. So it's just going to be a quick review. And like I said, you've taken Python, I'm sure, for just learning programming, I assume. But this is, like I said, with the goal of just interacting with the operating system and automating things. And we'll see that fairly quickly. Okay. All right, so let's go back. I'm going to close this. Let's go back to resources. Go back to the table of contents here. Yeah, so like I said, in resources, you have the website, the GitHub with all the code. This is the link to the YouTube channel. So all the, later today, I will be posting this video to the channel. And so you can, reference it. And I'll try to do the labs as well whenever I do a demo, etc. So you can always just kind of follow along. The other bit, so additionally, there's going to be this PCAP captures. So there's going to be a set of assignments that throughout the semester that just teach you how to use Wireshark. So I'm sure you've heard of Wireshark. You've used it in your networking courses. And so the goal here with these is just to they're basically little tutorials. And so you're going to need some PCAP files, which are basically files that have network packets in them, right? And so it's going to be like case study things, right? So throughout the semester, I will give you this PCAP Wireshark tutorials, and then you will just need to grab these, load them to Wireshark, and kind of follow and read through. All right, so the goal is just to teach you how to use Wireshark a little bit more, and so this is basically the resource that you will need for that. All right, finally, in the resources folder, I have a whole bunch of links and files related to the VM. Okay, as I said, this is the part that you really need to do this week, right? And you have to read all these materials, basically. So, there's a link here to create the VM. So we'll be using actually not VMware, but instead VirtualBox, right? So VirtualBox is free. There's no license, so you can install it on your computers, and that should be good enough for us to run our virtual machine. So there's going to be, this is the VM, so I'm going to click on this, the seed VM. So I just used the VM from the seed labs. So I'm sure maybe you've covered some of these labs, or you'll cover some of these labs in some of your courses. They're basically cybersecurity labs, and there's like many, right? So they provide a virtual machine, which is currently Ubuntu 2004, and they're constantly updating it, etc. So it's very easy for me to just use that because they're handling everything. So VMs. So as I said, there's Unix, as we will study throughout the semester. Actually, I will give you a little bit of history on Unix and Linux at some point in the semester, and it's a very interesting story, right? So there's Unix, then there's Linux, and then there's many versions of Linux, right? And the version that we're going to use is the Ubuntu version. And within that, there's going to be, Ubuntu 18, Ubuntu 20, Ubuntu 24, right? So we don't really want to use the latest Ubuntu, actually, as you will see, right? So that's one of the key things. We also don't want to use the oldest, right? So like the Goldilocks area, they're just right, is somewhere in the middle, right? Because it's usually the one that people have used, they found the bugs and corrected them and all that. So currently this, I'm sure at some point this will be updated to 2024, but currently we're using Ubuntu 2004. Make sense? So this is the VM that you will need for this semester. So some of you, if you've taken, you've used the Seed Labs before, you may have this VM already, okay? Or some of you may have taken other courses with me, and like the crypto course, so you may already have it. But if not, you will have to install this VM. How many, actually, let me ask you this. How many of you have this already on your computers, the Seed VM? Or have installed, how many of you have used VirtualBox and have installed? Okay. All right. So, and that's fine. This is really important that I start today and try to install this. Okay. So I have enough materials for this, like a nice little tutorial, but that's going to be really your first homework assignment. And it's very funny, but I've noticed that there's always two students that get really frustrated with setting up this VM. Yeah, go ahead, please. You can do whatever you want as long as you have Linux. We really don't need this one. You just really need a Ubuntu VM, and there's students that do that. What I will say is the advantage of using the Seed Labs VM is that there will be some labs where I use some programs that are already pre-installed on this version. And so it's just more convenient. But if you want to use another Ubuntu Linux operating system, that's perfectly fine. But I can't give you support, right? So you have to kind of, be independent and do that on your own. Make sense? Does that make sense for everyone? All right. Yeah, great question. All right. So yeah, so this will be the VM that you need to use. So let's go back. There should be a set of instructions here. So like I said, we're not using VMware because we have to pay a license and things like that. So you have to use VirtualBox. All right. So this should be the link to install Seed VM on VirtualBox. Right. So these instructions should be pretty good, and you can follow them exactly, and you should be able to get your operating system up and running. Does that make sense? So just follow all of this. You have to do every single step. It's clearly marked. There will be a couple of places where you'll have a problem. So I want to point that out right now, okay? That there's common problems. So all of this should be fine, I think. All of this should be fine. Give it as much RAM as you can, it depends on your computer, okay? It's going to depend on your laptop. I assume for those of you most of you have laptops, but for some of you that might be using the desktops, I believe VirtualBox is already installed on these. But, your computing students, I do recommend you get a laptop, right, for your studies. It's going to be much more get a Windows laptop. That's what I would say. Get a Dell XPS 13 or something, a good, if you can. Windows one should be fine. That's what I have. All right. And then you can run your VMs on a hard drive, on an external hard drive also. So that's something you can search. Otherwise, I just have it on my laptop. Make sense, guys? All right. So as I was saying, problems that you might encounter. So I think this is fine. This should be fine. Here should be fine. This is the CPUs. That's fine. This should be fine. Some of you will have a problem here. A lot of students have issues with this part in this tutorial. And the reason is you get to this and you look for this NAT network and you can't find it. Like it's not populated. All right. So what you have to do for that is you have to create that NAT network first. So just make a note of that. All right. And it's not difficult. You just in VirtualBox, you have to go somewhere. And I will look for that. But it's not difficult. You just go create the NAT network. And then once you've done that, then when you come here, it'll populate and you can continue with the installation. Okay, so we'll solve it. And I may have that already in one of the documents. But this is a common thing that I've seen. Students kind of get stuck in this part. All right, and then let's see. You don't have to do this appendix, creating a shared folder. Although you can do it if you want to. Yeah. All right. So that's the main, this should be your main document for doing this. Let's go back to the resources. I've basically over the years created a whole bunch of whenever I see a common error, I've created some kind of a website or post just to kind of record that information for future classes. All right. So this, I already went through over this. That's the VM. Okay, so I've covered that. I've covered this link, right, which is this document. Covered YouTube link for the videos, the GitHub. So let's go over this. So on the basically on the Seed Labs. Yeah, so I think this is just another version of the document. Wait a minute. If errors UID set up seed on VirtualBox. Let me click on this again. Okay, so this is just taking you to the Seed Labs website, where this is providing kind of the same tutorial. So this is the same. Memory is the same. Yeah. So here, select NAT. Just compare. So I think that's the instructions that are teaching you how to create the NAT network that you will need in this step. Yeah, so actually, right. So this is NAT network. Actually, it's the same. All right, so I think they're both just really the same document. Anyway, you will have this issue of adding the NAT network. So I'll have to provide that additional information. Okay. All right, so the other thing, I was looking for this error. I think I just added this incorrectly. This link is not the one that I was expecting. So let me go to the GitHub. So let me show you something. So I have additional links. Let's go to the GitHub here. All right, and seed VM errors. So I think this is the, yeah, this one. So let me add this. See this errors UUID, I added this incorrectly. Just gonna add a link. All right. All right, so I just added that link, that additional link to the resources. You can see it, UUID error, okay? So I'll talk about this one also because this is not something that will happen to most of you, but it does happen to a few of you every semester. And so I want to address that. So what is the UUID error? So the UUID error is basically like the identifier of a VM. This happens when you already had a VM on your computer. Do you see what I'm saying? So let's say that you already, for some reason, you took another course and you already had the CVM in there. And then you decide, okay, for 372, I just want a fresh copy. I'm going to install it again. You follow all the instructions, and then boom, something doesn't work. And you get this UUID error, and you really don't know what it is, right? Because it's kind of complicated to understand. So that's what this is. It just basically means that you already had a computer, and it's almost like you had a computer with a UUID or like a MAC address, and then you created a new one, and that one also wants to have the same MAC, and it's linking them somehow, and then it just creates a whole bunch of problems for you. So whenever you, also this may happen because there are some labs. So I really want you to understand this because if you don't, you're going to waste a lot of time. So what may also happen is that we have some labs where we have to have two computers, right? So one computer attacks the other computer, right? So you do the defense in one and the attack in one or something like that. But when you're making a copy of the CVM, they both have the same UID. And so you're going to run into this problem. So the solution is very simple, and it's provided here in this example. All you have to do is before you create the new machine, you kind of have to go in to the folder where the image is located, and you run a command that will change the ID. Do you see what I'm saying? So let's say the ID was 37. When you make a clone of it, that one also has the number 37. So that's a problem. But by running this command, you'll have 37 and now 38. So then when you create the two machines, they have different IDs. It's equivalent to them having different MAC addresses. And therefore, now you can have two machines. Does that make sense, guys? So this is a problem that you might run into. So UUID is and this is a virtual box problem, okay? That is should be straightforward to solve. So UUID is a universally unique identifier. It's a string of characters used to identify a specific virtual disk, right? Which is this .vdi file that you will be using. The UUID of a virtual disk can be changed for various reasons, such as to avoid duplication or to keep the virtual disk separate from others with the same name, okay? So again, you will need to understand this because certainly in about 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to start doing like the DNS lab, et cetera, and that requires 2, maybe even 3 virtual machines. All you have to do, if you're using Windows, which I assume most of you are using, go to the, the prompt, right? Go to the C drive, and you will type CD, and then you have to go to Programs, Oracle VirtualBox. So that's the folder where your VDI may be located. And then this is just an example. And then you would run a program called vboxmanage.exe. That's a VirtualBox program. And you just tell it to change the UID. Does that make sense? All right. So I've provided this link just so you're aware of it. It's in the GitHub, but this semester I've added it to the resources. Okay. And these are generally the common errors that I see, the common problems that students face when setting up VirtualBox. So definitely consider VirtualBox your first challenge. When I boot up my VM in a little bit, we'll go over this idea of how to create the NAT network. All right. So if you have a note, make a note, right? I may encounter the UUID problem if if I already have a seed VM on my computer. Therefore, I have to follow those instructions on UUID. Or I may encounter when setting this up that I don't have a NAT network. Therefore, I have to create that first, right? So I'll cover that as soon as I boot up VirtualBox. Any questions so far, guys? Yeah. And then once you've configured everything, you'll have your Ubuntu 2004 operating system running, and then that's what we will use for the whole semester. Okay. All right, let me close all these windows. And that's the fun of system administration, right? Configuring services. All right, so let's go back to the table of contents. All right, so we've covered the syllabus, gave you an idea of the project, looked at the resources. You will be using this mainly to set up your computer, and the VM should be located here. So you'll need to download that, and it'll probably be from one of these. So you want to use the pre-built. So you would want to use this one. Okay. And then, yeah, so 2004. All right. Right. So now we are ready, after all that, right? All the administrative things, to kind of look at the next module, intro. So let's click on that. So I'll go over this. As you can see here, I have the traditional slides for this one. Just give you a little bit. I will do a history of Unix, but not today. Just, it's nice to have a context. It's a really nice, interesting story, right? Of how it started, who are the people that created this operating system, which is so important. And there's been a lot of people, and there's even movies, actually, right? The Pirates of Silicon Valley, right? And things like that. So there's even movies of, Bill Gates, was Windows, and there's Mac and Linux, and there's been like fights, and they didn't like each other, right? So there's a whole history about this operating system. So very, very nice. And we'll cover some of that later in the semester. But today I'm just giving you kind of like an idea. So the VM that we're going to use is the Ubuntu Seed VM. As I said, it's a popular cybersecurity VM. You'll use it. It's the one we decided to use in the program, since you guys take some seed labs and things like that in other courses. So it makes sense to use the same VM. So there's a manual that comes with it, which is this one. And basically all you need to know read through it. I mean, it changes over time, but really all you need to know is when you log in, you use seed, and the password is the reverse of it. Okay, so you will log in to the VM. After that, just kind of read it for your own FYI. You really don't have to do any of this right away, although we will be learning about some of these things, how to change the password, how to create accounts, and all of that as we go through the semester. But yeah, you have that document. And basically, I provide it because it has the username and password. That's essentially what you need. All right. Then the next thing I will cover is kind of illustrate what the lab will be for this week. And then we'll finish up today with the slides, basically. All right. So this week's lab is basically getting the VM up and running. So I would recommend that you try to do that between today and Wednesday. So have that up and running by Wednesday, right? Try to have your VM. And then on Wednesday, this would be the lab. So let's see what I have here. Yeah, so this is just what the homework will be. From the attached Word document, complete bullets 1 through 26, and submit a report with screenshots of each problem and answer the questions. All right, so the way that I do homework assignments, what I want you to do is to create, and please make a note of this, a report. In the past, I've had students that there's 26 problems, they take 26 screenshots, and then they just post 26 images on Brightspace. Please don't do that. Okay, instead, you create a Word document, PDF, something that I can open on this computer, which uses Windows, right, for me to grade. Does that make sense? You can start with the document I provided, just download that, right? You need to do two things, right? So this is how you do homework. So you need to, if there's a question, answer it, right? You don't need to write a paragraph, 2-3 sentences is fine. Just address what I'm asking. And then also have evidence. That's the criteria. Just enough evidence to prove that you did it. So you don't have to have 30 screenshots to prove that you did something, right? One problem. Just provide one. If you really, so what I would say to students, the recommendation is really understand the question. Because if you understand the topic and you understand the question, you know when you've answered it, right? And so you just probably need to provide one screenshot. Does that make sense? That's the key thing, right? So understand the question, and then you'll know how to, when you've answered it. But I do want some evidence that you did it, so I do prefer screenshots, okay? So you did a task, here's the screenshot of it. Make sense? So you're essentially, when you're writing a script, if you just give me code, that does not prove that you did it, right? The code has to run, and it has to do the task that it's meant to do, okay? So make sure you provide that. So yeah, so that's, any questions about the homework? This is where I have problems sometimes, especially the first couple of weeks. Word, PDF with the questions, the answer, screenshot of what you did should be sufficient. Yeah, great. Sounds like that's clear. All right, so this would be the lab then, the first lab. Labs will be like this. Sometimes a lab might have several PDF files that you need to use for reference, different documents, etc., images, things like that. But there will be either a Word document with the questions or something, right? So where I'll say exactly what I want. So in this case, this is kind of what you need to do for this week, for Thursday. And I'll demo this, but it's basically your first lab. I sometimes do this, like I have bullets or numbers for all the problems. So you can see basically, this is the lab. It has about 28 or 26, I should say, different questions or topics. And then basically it relates to commands in Linux, right? So this is your first, and this takes me to the question. How many of you have already used Linux? Show of hands. Okay. All right, so some of you have used Linux, others haven't. So for some of you, this will be pretty easy in a review. For others, this is new, but you can learn this really quickly, okay? Now, you don't have to memorize any of this. What I would say, and this is a recommendation I give all students, if you don't already, get a GitHub account, okay? This is, the way that I look at GitHub is like an enhancement to my brain, all right? Why? Because I can access GitHub from anywhere, right? Via the link online. And so it's like a memory an external memory that I have. So I organize actually a lot of my knowledge on GitHub. And whenever I need something, I just go there. So you can, create an account on GitHub, create a link, or sorry, a repo in there, call it like Unix or Linux or something, and put your commands there. And whenever you need a command, you can just get it from there, right? Instead of memorizing, instead of having in a notebook somewhere, you always have it there, okay? So I would recommend that you do that. So essentially, I'm not asking you to memorize things, but you have to have some understanding, right, of how Linux works. So these are the commands that I would consider to be the first commands that you should know, very important ones. Okay, so I'll come back to some of these later. But thinks about, well, what is the key thing in Linux that we need to understand? Well, everything is a file in Linux, and basically the structure of the file system. That's really one of the key things. Then after that is access control, right? So those, remember everything. If you haven't used Linux before, you're used to the GUI interface, right? So you want to use the GUI Windows approach. But here, I'm going to do everything on the terminal, right? I'll show you what the terminal is today also, kind of start with that. But everyone, and that's fine, you'll start doing things through the GUI, and there are things that you can do through the GUI that are just easier, but the goal is really for you to become accustomed to the terminal by the end of the semester and to find it to be easy. Remember that if you're going to be the administrator for a Linux server, it may not even have a GUI, right? It's just going to be on a rack somewhere. Maybe it's a web server, whatever it is. For you to connect to it, you'll have to use something called SSH, connect into it, and then all you get is a terminal. And the whole, you're going to configure it, change it, whatever, through the terminal only, right? And so you really want to become very accustomed to it. That's basically it, okay? And then after that, there's only, a certain amount of knowledge you need to have. And after that, you can just learn on your own, okay? So that's the idea. If you're interested in jobs like cloud administrator, something like that, you're going to be using Linux a lot of the time. There's a lot of advantages to Linux, as you might understand. Got it? Thanks. So yeah, all right. So this will be the lab. So just to give you an idea, what I would do is download this document, go through all the questions, and then just provide a screenshot that's evidence that you have done the task. Okay. And then you add the screenshots to these questions. You answer the question with 1 or 2 sentences and move on. Okay. And then when you're finished with it, just save it. You can submit the Word document or convert this to PDF. You can submit the PDF, etc. Got it? All right. So I will start with this today, but let's just go over the slides really quickly before I actually move to the virtual machine. Okay. So the last thing that we're going to cover this week from the Brightspace. So we've covered admin, this module, resources, and this. Next week, we will look at, as you can see, scripting and case. So that basically means we'll take a look at Python, the Cuckoo's Egg, which is actually a book that we'll talk about next week. It's like a novel, but it's really interesting case. So this is going to be next week, basically a more formal introduction or review of Python for sysadmin, okay? So that's going to be the topic next week. So basically, we are here. You know what the homework is. I haven't created the link yet. I will do that on Thursday, okay? So in Thursday's class, I'll create the link and provide all that information. But before we get to the VM, let's just go over the slides because that's the other thing that I want to point out. Pretty much every module will have a set of slides. So I think I need to download. Also, the classes run until 1:40, right? So the class will end at 1:40 every day. All right, so these are the slides, and this is what I was saying. So these slides may include technical topics or they may include managerial topics related to sysadmin, right? So always read the slides is my recommendation, as I don't really have time to cover all the material. So let me do that. You guys can see that? Yeah, great. So basically, this is the slides, the format of them, all the, and then what these slides, the focus of these slides is what do system administrators do? And you guys already know kind of what a sysadmin does, basically somebody that works in IT, right, and deals with the network or deals with desktops or computers or servers. The cloud, it just depends on the type of organization, the size, etc. Okay. So these are just very managerial oriented slides. So I'll kind of just quickly go through them and I'll let you read them basically. So what do system administrators do? Building a site from scratch, and then it goes over all the things. Growing a small site, talks about the help desk, etc. Going global, replacing services, like setting up a web server, setting up an email server, etc. All right, so I think you get the idea of what these slides are about. What does a system administrator do? So my recommendation is read through them, okay? So I don't have to bore you with this. It's something that you can easily read through. All right. The last thing though from these slides that I do want to point out, it's that. Who are these gentlemen? That's Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. All right, so they're part of the history of Unix. They're actually the creators of the Unix operating system before it was Linux, there's Ubuntu. Before that's the distro. Linux is a version of Unix. Do you guys know who created Linux? No, really? Okay. All right. So there's what's his first name? Torvalds is his Linus. Linus Torvalds is the name of the person that created Linux. Linux. See the connection there? All right. So anyway, that's part of the history. He's still alive, by the way. He did that when he was really young. And, the idea, I guess he just wanted to build an operating system. This is back in the day when there was this battle between closed source and open source, right? So closed source is something like Windows, right? You guys pay money for Windows, correct? Right? And and you don't really know how the operating system works, right? Because you don't have the code, the source code, whereas Linux is available, right? So we'll talk about that as well. Does that make it more secure because it's open source? Probably, right? All right, because many people, if you're interested in Linux, you can go in, look at the software, look for bugs, correct them, improve it, right? So that's kind of the idea with open source and Linux. But before Linux Torvalds, back, I guess, in the 70s, 80s, there were these two guys, Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. If I remember correctly, they were working at Bell Labs. And this probably happened in the 60s, I want to say. And they created something called Unix, right? So anyway, when I go over the history of it and everything, we'll touch back on this idea, right? So this has been around since the 50s, probably, I would say 50s, 60s. Any questions? All right, so make sure you read through the slides, okay? And yeah, and this has several, this basically, as I said, I just took that managerial book and I've just summarized it into these slides. So this goes over chapters 1 and chapter 2. So please read through these, it's just basic concepts. All right, so I think now we are ready then to get into the virtual machine. Okay, so that's the next thing. So I already installed it. I have it available. This is should be your main focus in this class between today and Wednesday. Try to have your operating system up and running. All right, so let's see how that works. So basically, you're going to have a VirtualBox, which you will need to install, which is this link I have here. So I'm going to double click on it. All right, and then you'll have something like this. Okay, so I have two VMs. So obviously I've done the UUID thing and everything. And we'll look at labs later in the semester where we have to, send information from one VM to the other, et cetera. So they need to be connected in the network. But for now, we're just going to focus on one VM, which is going to be this one, 2004. So I'm going to start it here. Click on start. Okay. And then we're just going to play with it a little bit. All right, so it opens this other window here. Still loading. So once you've configured your VM, you should be able to do all of this, right? And you will arrive at the main interface. For Linux. Okay, here we go. So you're just going to have this account seed initially by default from a fresh install. So you can click on seed. Okay, then you type in the password, which is the one I said, D, so just the opposite. So DEES. All right, and here we go. So this is your operating system, basically, that you're going to be looking at all semester. Okay, so everything that we will do this semester will focus on just understanding how Linux works, understanding how to use the commands, use the terminal, and basically writing scripts in Linux. All right, so the very first place, so obviously it has a GUI, and that's similar to Windows, but essentially, we're going to live in the terminal, okay? So I'm going to show you that. So this is the terminal, so you can click on that. And then it looks something like this. So this is the terminal. Now, my terminal looks a little bit different from yours, right? So yours, initially on a fresh install, will not have that, right? I've already installed a program called Anaconda, and it's something that we will learn about later in the semester. And when you have Anaconda installed on Linux, then it shows this idea of having multiple environments. So that's another concept I'll explain, but later. But basically, it's like different environments. So you select environment one, you have a fresh environment, and then you can go in and install different programs with different versions. But then let's say that you're using a library like something called NumPy, and you're using NumPy 3. But there's another problem, and for that problem, you need NumPy 4. So what do? Do you upgrade to NumPy 4? That's kind of instinctively what we know to do. But then what's going to happen to the programs that only work on NumPy 3? They stop working. Do you see what I'm saying? And so this is called version control or library control. So it's a nice solution. So in the past, so one thing about Linux in the past, like 15 years ago, it was much harder to use, right? Because you had to install one program, but for that program, you had to manually install every single library that it needed. And that was very painful. So if you had like 40 libraries for that one program, you had to do all that work. And then what happens when you had to do some other task and you needed another library, but one of those libraries, but a different version of it. So you can see how that was just a nightmare, right? So this was invented. Things like Anaconda, Docker, etc., have been created so that you have this idea where you can have one environment with libraries and specific versions of the libraries, and you can create another environment for other versions of the same library, right? So this is one of the topics in the course that we will cover later, okay? Yeah, go ahead, please. They're similar in the sense of the concept of creating containers. I don't know who owns which, but Anaconda is more of something that you install like in the operating system, like Windows or Linux, whereas Docker is more like VirtualBox. You have to install a program and then you install operating systems on it. So, but I would say they still create the container idea, which is really the focus. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. But yeah, so anyway, so lots of concepts, but I just wanted to point out that it'll look a little bit different. All right, so now that we're here, let's kind of just do a few things in Linux to kind of get a feel for how it works, okay? So the first thing that you probably want to do when you get this terminal is you want to know where you are, okay? So these are some of the commands that you will need for this. So two commands that I like to use are ls-l, right? I already know how the file system works, but basically whenever you're looking at the operating system, that's what you want to like have in your mind, right? Is you want to understand, okay, where am I in the file system, right? So that's what I'm doing here. So what I'm doing here is I'm just listing everything that's in this folder, all right? So I can see that this says Anaconda, desktop, documents, download. So if something is highlighted like this blue, it's a directory. And if it's not, it's a file. We will learn later on also that there's a lot of information actually that's being provided here because of that, right? That's the part that relates to access control. So it not only does it provide you a lot of information about, you know, where you are in the file system, but it provides a lot of information about the security of these files, folders, etc., right? So all of that falls under this idea of access control. We'll get to it eventually. For now, though, we can start to learn a few things about it. So every one of these things, you can think of it as being called a flag, okay? And the first flag is this one that either has a little letter D, which basically means directory, or it just has a little, this thing here, like a dash, and that just basically indicates that it's a file, okay? So again, it provides you information. So if I just do ls, notice that it only lists the folder, the names of folders or files in this. But if I do ls-l, then you can see it gives me more info. So this is one of the very important commands in Unix. Another one, or Linux. One of the commands I'll use is just clear, just kind of clear out the screen. All right. Another command that is really important just to know where you are is this one, pwd. So you run pwd and it basically gives you the path, right? The absolute path where you are in the operating system. This is really important, I should say, because you want to know where you are in the operating system. Okay, so here it tells me that I'm in the root, and then in the root, I am in the home directory, and then in the home directory, I am in the seed directory. So why seed? Because seed is my account. If you remember, you logged in into the operating system as seed, right? You typed in the password Ds. So when you log in to the Linux with an account, that account is connected to a home folder, basically. And the home folder has the same name as the account, and it's located in the folder called home. Does that make sense? And this home folder is basically located in the root directory. So if you're familiar in in Windows, whenever you've gone to the DOS command or something like that, when you get to the very root of the file system, you basically see the drive, right? So you see either like a C or D, and that tells you that you're in that drive. Linux is a little bit different in the sense that you have a file system and it's like a tree. And then things like drives can be added anywhere in that tree. So that's something that we will look at later on, okay? So basically then there's no idea of this being the C drive, the root of the whole file system, because the C drive could actually be here where we are, right? But you do have a starting point to this tree, and that's called the root directory. And that's denoted by this /. Okay? So the / indicates like the start of the file system, Linux. So we can look at that just by doing something like this. So here I'm introducing another command. This means change directory, and it's like a command that you're going to use a lot to move in the file system, okay? So basically you say cd change directory, and then you tell it where you want to go. So for instance, I want to go to the root, to the start of the tree, so I just give it this symbol, /. Do you see that, guys? That make sense? That's it. So now I press enter, of course. So if you type pwd, notice that now it just says that the full path is where? Root, because you changed directory to root. So now you can do ls. You can see it's got all the folders. So this is the classic file system set of folders and files in the root. Now for Ubuntu, there's Red Hat, there's several versions of Linux, right? And so each one might have a different set of folders, but in general, these folders will be in most Linux operating systems, at least some of them, such as bin, where you have your executables, what is called the binaries, the programs, right? You're going to have the etc folder. We will look at all of this later in more detail, but etc is where you have like configuration files. You will have proc, which is something very related to the kernel. You will have var, which kind of stands for variable. So this is where you will have files that vary a lot in size. So for instance, log files. So a log file is basically a file that's recording everything that is happening in the operating system. So you can imagine how, as you're doing things, that file is going to fill up quite a bit, right? And so that's where you put logs, basically. So the way that you should think about this is the operating system in Linux has several specific folders, and you put certain things. Things are organized logically into these individual folders. Make sense? So believe it or not, 1 week, we may just spend the whole week just talking about the var folder, right? So that's kind of the way the course is going to work. var also includes the websites. So for instance, if we were to make this this Linux machine into a web server, we would have to configure the some kind of a web server, right? Something the default one is Apache, so we would configure that service, and then of course that's running. That's going to start serving websites. It's going to open port 80 on the computer, and then if we build a website, we're going to build it in this folder var. Okay. There's a few others that are just for managing the system. This is the folder where most of your files are going to live. So it's the home folder. So the home folder is where you create accounts. So you'll see, for instance, in a lab where you have to create a whole bunch of accounts, that whenever you create an account, a folder for that account needs to be created. So, a home folder. So like the My Documents kind of thing in Windows, where you're going to put in your files, your scripts, whatever you're doing. Make sense? All right, so let's kind of navigate into one folder, then get out of it and navigate into another one, just to kind of get a feel for how this works. So I'm going to do cd var, right? Cd var, you can see var right here. So I go in it, ls-l, you can see I've got a lot of information about this folder. And one important thing is to look at this, www. So this is what I was saying. So basically, when you have websites, this is where you would put your websites. If you make this into a web server and you put your web files somewhere else, it's not going to work. So basically, this is designated for the location of your websites. It's got the security that it requires, etc. Okay, makes sense? So then if we want to go into this www, we can do that. And you can see I've got HTML and so on. So I continue to navigate in there and I can find some websites. If you kind of forget where you are, once again, you can just type pwd. You can see, oh, okay, this is where I'm at. So now you want to return to your home folder. So what do you do? So there's a couple of things. You could do this, and that's just going to take you back to the root, and then you can just make your way into home. Or if you remember, you can just go directly into home by typing /home. If you just type home without the /, it's going to look for home in this folder, right? And it's not going to find it. So if you here, I'm going to do ls-l, there is no home folder, right? So instead, if I want to get to the home, I have to add this, which if you remember, this indicates go to the root and then from there find the folder. Make sense? This is important. I've seen this as a common mistake that students make. Okay. Questions? Yes, please. Where? Do you see it here? Where was it? Just a var? I get you. So this is var. This L here, that means link. So link is another concept that we will cover at some point in the semester. So in Linux, you can have these things called symbolic links. What that means is, so here's a good example of this. Let's say that you have a program that uses Java, right? The Java program. So whenever you do the configuration for that program, you just say use Java. But the thing is, Java every year might change versions, right? So you have Java 3, Java 4, Java 5. So let's say that today you install Java 5 and next year you install Java 6, right? So if you link your program to Java 5, what's going to happen when you upgrade? It's not going to work because it can't find Java 6. It's programmed to find Java 5. But if you have a symbolic link, the advantage is now all you have to change is the symbolic link without having to go to your program and making those changes. So the program just says use Java. It looks for Java here. Imagine this says Java. And then when it finds it, that Java is just pointing to some other file. Java 4, Java 5, Java 6. You guys see that? So it's like, it's just a name in memory. And that name points to another file. Do you guys understand? So that's what symbolic links are for. Whenever you want to create a name, everything. So another concept you should understand is everything in Linux is a file, like everything. And so, right, because you have this idea, you create a file which is just a name. And then whenever you reference that, if it has the L, it's basically pointing to something else that may actually be a file containing information. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so we'll cover these things later. That's symbolic link, and I'll provide a better example of how we use it. But that Java example is a good illustration. Any other questions? So don't worry about access control. As I said, we really need to know what everything here means, right? So that's one of the things that we're going to study later on, is because that provides a lot of security. And I would say that the whole security of the operating system is basically of the Linux operating system is in relation to this. All right. So every file will have an owner, and it's going to be, so it's going to a user and a group. And then for that user and that group, you have a certain set of like permissions, right? And all of that, believe it or not, is summarized by this, and these parameters here. Okay. So we'll come back to that later. All right. All right. So let's continue. So I think we were going back to the home folder, right? So that was what we were trying to do. So again, let's say I don't remember where I am. So I'm just going to type pwd. Okay, this tells me a lot now. So I'm in var, and I want to go back to home, because that's really where all my files are going to live. So if you look, let me move this down. If I minimize this one, close that. So this is my desktop, right? And my desktop is located in my home folder seed, which is located in home. And so let's say that I want to find one of these files. Let's say I want to find this one, string length.sh, for whatever reason. I want to go into that file and modify it, right? So how do I do that? So I'm in the command line. I know I'm in var. I'm going to do ls-l just to know the files. Now I want to go to home. So I can either, if I remember the path, I can just type home and then desktop and all of that. But if you don't remember, you can just go to home, or sorry, to root, like that. So now I'm going to do clear just to kind of clear this up. pwd, right? So I know I'm in root. I'm going to do ls-l to remind me what's in this folder. I know I want to go to home. This one. Oops. That one. So I'm going to do cd home, clear, ls-l. So now this is the home folder. These are all the accounts that I've created on this computer. And I want to go to the desktop of my account. I'm currently logged in as seed. So that's this folder here, seed. Let's say that I was signed in as dummy2, then this would be my home folder. And of course, here permissions will start to apply. So if you're a regular user, so let's say that this is a student, dummy2, and this is another student, seed, and they have their homework assignments. Obviously, you don't want seed to look at the homework assignment of dummy2, right, and copy it, right? So permissions apply here, okay? So a lot of permissions will apply here, and that takes us into the idea of, are you a regular user or are you a system administrator user? So another concept that's really important that we will cover later, but just be aware of it, right? So you can say if you have multiple users in here, these would be their home folders, and obviously there have to be certain restrictions, etc., right? And all of that is governed through access control. But anyway, let's keep to the task. So we are trying to get to the home folder of seed. So let's do that. Okay, so I want to go to seed basically. ls-l. Okay, now now I'm located. So if I do pwd, you can see that I'm in the seed folder for my account. What I want to do now is do what? Remember, I was looking for that file, that sh file that's located in the desktop, right? So then I go to desktop. And also you might be seeing me just kind of like auto-completing things whenever, like if I type DES and then I just press the tab key, it auto-completes. So it just speeds up the processing. So just be aware. All right, so now I can go in the desktop. You can see that. I'm going to hit clear pwd. Okay, so I made it to my desktop. And these are the files. And then I was looking for string2sh, right? Do you guys see that? So I found my file. If I want to look at the file, then we're going to learn other programs. Two of the programs that we'll be using here are cat and nano. So I can do cat script. Notice that it completes until script because there's a script 2 and a script 3. So it doesn't really know which one. So then I have to say script 2 and then it completes the rest, right? And then if I do this, notice it shows you your first bash script in Unix. Okay, so we'll cover this later in the semester, how to use bash. Got it? Between bash and Python, I prefer Python a lot more. It's easier. Bash is less forgiving, right? And harder, a little bit harder, but it's really important. I should say that bash is an old programming language, but if you're doing something that is sysadmin related with Unix, a lot of it is going to be in bash. So you should definitely know that language. Okay, even things like starting up the computer, like the operating system itself. Basically, when the operating system is starting, it's running a whole bunch of bash scripts with instructions. Okay, so definitely it's something that we will cover at some point in the semester. But I much prefer Python, I should say. It's a lot easier. Got it? All right. So we found our script there, and then let's say you want to modify. So cat only shows the script, but it doesn't allow you to modify it. If you want to modify it, then you would type script 2. So I'm using nano now instead. See that? And now you can see the script here, but I can add things to it. All right. Any questions? Oh, yeah, please. Nano allows you to edit, to change. And cat is generally just to show. And other tasks like concatenate, actually, and things like that. I mean, it's a much more powerful command than just to view things, but you'll see me use cat a lot. But whenever we modify or write a script from scratch, I'll usually just use nano in the editor. Cat may make a new file, yes. There's other programs like Touch, etc., that can also create files. But there's VI. So some of you, I always have a student that's like a pro in VI, and that's a very powerful native editor for Linux that you can use if you want to. I think it's harder to use, so I think Nano is very easy. So we'll cover that. Make sense? All right. So I think that's enough for today. It's a quick introduction to the to the course, basically. Remember, our classes are going to end at 1:40. I will post this video later in the day once I get into my office. And remember, so going back to Brightspace, your homework assignment between now and Wednesday is to install your virtual machine and get basically the operating system that I had. You don't have to submit an assignment, but do it because you're going to need it on Thursday. On Thursday, basically, we're going to go back to the homework, go over all the commands, maybe even write our first introductory script in Python. All right, so please go to, where is it? Resources, right? And follow all these instructions to try to set up your CVM. Any questions? All right, we can stop here for today, and I will see you guys on Thursday for the lab. Okay? Yeah.
So I tried setting up the VM.
Yeah.
I just had a quick the edit doors, so I was able to attach the network just fine.
Oh, great.
But I can't select the name. It won't let me set it up without the name.
You are? Let me see. Let me close the video. Hold on.